In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to build this random cat app using React hooks. Before we start, let me give you guys a demo on how this works. Number one, if you go here and click this new random cat button, you can get a random cat every single time that you click it. But before we start, there are a couple things that you need to make sure that you have. Number one, go inside your terminal and make sure that you have Node.js installed. And if you don't have Node.js installed, the following tools we're going to be using, you won't be able to download them. Number two, you need to go to Create React App and try to install the Create React App CLI. What that means is go to Google and search for Create React App and click the first link you see. Then once you find that, scroll all the way down wherever you have this command and you'll be able to install a Create React App CLI. And if you don't have the Node.js installed, make sure you go to this side in order for you to get the Node.js. And lastly but not least, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. If you don't have it, make sure you have it. If not, you can feel free to use whatever favorite text editor that you have or IDE. And now time to get our hands dirty. So first thing first, navigate to wherever you have your terminal. And I'm going to navigate inside the desktop folder and I'm going to use the Create React App to create a React application called Cat App. Again, you can feel free to name this whatever you want. In my case, I just give this one a name called Cat App and I'm using the Create React App CLI. Before we do this, if you're not sure if you have the Create React App CLI installed, you can just go ahead and do Create React App -- version. That will tell you either or not you have the Create React App CLI installed. In my case, I'm going to run this command to create the React app for me and name this application called Cat App and click enter. This will take a second to generate everything and boom, assuming everything went as expected, we have now everything ready to go. The next thing I need to do is follow this step. I'm going to go and CD inside this app, my application called Cat App. So I'm going to CD inside of it. And there we go. Once I am inside that app, I'm going to go here and open this one inside my Visual Studio. Again, if you don't have this command, you might have to go and manually open that entire folder into VS Code. In my case, it worked for me. So I'm going to go ahead and open this entire folder and I should have something that looks like this. So once I have that, I need to go inside the SRC folder and I'm going to go inside wherever we have the app.js. Now, before I do anything, I'm going to go back to the terminal and I'm going to do npm start. And what that is going to start the React application for me. Assuming everything have gone as expected, you should have something like this. And then you should have a page that looks like this with the port of 3000. Back to the code. Now, once you have this set up, we're going to go back inside that file, which is app.js, and we're going to go here and delete everything that we have here. We're going to start from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to go here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by importing the React and the entire React application itself. And once I have that, I'm going to declare a function and I'm going to name this function something called app. And again, the fact that we're working with React hooks, everything that you're going to write with React hooks, they have to be inside of functional component. Okay, so we have a component called app, and once we have that component, I'm going to go here and export that one as default. And now inside this component, I'm going to go here and write my JSX. Now I just go here and return. I'm going to go here and write a div. Inside that div, I'm going to have an h1, something like welcome to my app. Ladies and gentlemen, let's review everything we've done so far. We've gone ahead and import React. And then we define a function, which is that's what we did. And we define our JSX inside of it. Again, it's just HTML. And then we export this application. Let's see how it looks like right now. And boom, we have something that looks like this, which is great, which is awesome, but that's not what we want. What we really want is an app that is generating a random image of a cat. That's what we want. First thing first, before we focus into anything that's complicated, I'm going to go here and knock a couple things down. So I'm going to replace this one with the name of my app. Again, you can feel free to name it whatever you want. I'm going to name this one the best cat app ever created. Again, something very simple. Second, I'm going to go here and add a very simple image, and I'm going to go through the entire internet, wherever you guys go to, and I'm just going to go here and add a URL of a cat that I save. You can go throughout the entire internet to pick a random cat image. That is okay for you guys. Don't worry, as we're gonna replace this one with some dynamic value. But for now, that should do the work that we want. Lastly but not least, we want a very basic button, and that button is going to have something like get new random cat. And let's check and see what this looks so far. So if I go here, boom, we have something like this, which is great, which is fantastic. But check this out. When I click on this button, nothing happened. Like nothing happened. And what should happen is whenever we click on this button, we should be expecting to see the image change, and then we have a new random cat. How can we do that? Well, before we go any crazy, again guys, the purpose of this is to show you how you can use the React hooks, but we're going to go as basic as possible so that everybody can follow along. But before we go any further, let's do one thing. Let's make sure at least when we click on this button, we at least seeing something in the console. Okay, so I'm going to right click, inspect this element. Once I go and inspect this element, so I'm going to go here inside the console.log, and then this is where we're going to be able to verify a lot of things. Number one, we're going to select this element. We're going to attach a click event to it. Now, how can we do that? The way we can do that, we're going to go back to the code, and here's the button that we're looking at. So I'm going to go right here, wherever this is. I'm going to add a click event to it. So I'm going to go here and add an event call on click. And once I have that, I'm gonna attach it to a function. And we don't have this function yet. Let's go ahead and define a function here. I'm gonna call this one getCat. So this function is going to be the function that go ahead and get every single cat for me. For now, it's not gonna do that yet. All I needed to do, in order for us to test this, we just want this one to say something like hello world. Again, this is going to be the function that go ahead and get every single our cat for us. For now, let's just go ahead and take this function, and we're going to call this function inside the click event right here. So what that means is every single time that the user click this button, we're gonna go ahead and run this function. For now, all it's doing is console login hello world. Let's see this in action. So if I go here and click this button, I should be able to see hello world inside my console. So let's take a look. So if I click get random, and boom, ladies and gentlemen, my click event is working. And if I click it again, it is working. But the big question is, how can we get those cats? How can we get those random cats? Where can we go and find them? Well, in order for us to go and find them, we gotta find a place that's already have those cats image available for us to grab. And the good news is there is a place called a cat API that's available on the internet where we can go and get those cat image. But check this out. If I go through this website, which is an API that we can consume into our application, this is the entire service that they offer. Check this out. I can either choose to vote for a cat if I like it. Let's assume that I like this cat. I can build this functionality. There's a breed functionality. There's an image search functionality where you can search cat per categories and so on. And there is a favorite functionality. You can even build a functionality where you can upload your own picture of your cat. But for the purpose of this video, we're only going to focus on the image search functionality. We do not want to go crazy. This is what we're going to focus on, and we're just going to build something very, very simple and not as complicated as this one, just for you guys to understand the React hooks. So how can we get those image? Well, in order for us to get this image, we need what they call an API key. And for us, you see, get your own API key. So for you to get your own API key, you need to go here and click sign up for free, and then you enter your email and app description. You can describe your app, whatever you're doing, and click sign up. Well, what's gonna happen is when you sign up for an API key, they're going to send you an email of your API key that looks like this. So once you have this email, go ahead and copy this entire API key. So I'm I'm going to go here, copy, go back to my code, and I'm going to place this one somewhere here. And there you go. I add this one into a variable called API key just in case I need it. For this demo, we're not going to need the API key, but just wanted to show you guys how you can get yours in case you want to implement a noted functionality, because if you want to implement one of those vote functionality, then you're definitely going to need the key in order for you to get this work. So the one we're using not going to require us, but we're going to show you how you can do that first. But the big question is, okay, Sterling, we got the API key, which is fantastic, but how are we going to get those data? Well, the good news is they have a place where they have a documentation in order for us to get started. So I'm going to click on here, and here's the documentation. You can see here they kind of start and explaining every single things that we can do with the documentation. They even give us a quick get random kitty, which means this is a quick starting point where we can get a random image. So all we need is copy this link. I'm going to copy it, open it in a new tab, and if I paste it in there, we should be able to get a random cat. And boom, that's a random cat. And if I go here, there is the image for that random cat. If I open it into a new tab again, there you go, I got a random cat for this request. And if I refresh it again, and if I click on this image, I got another random cat. So somehow we're going to need to use this URL to make that HTTP request. Again, if that doesn't make sense for you, don't worry, we're going to learn how to do that. But all I need to do in this case is I'm going to copy this URL, and I'm going to go back again. I'm going to store this one into a variable here and paste it right there. Okay, so far we got the API key, and also we get the URL, which is fantastic. Before I go any further, I want to give you guys a demo on their documentation just in case you want to explore it further. First thing first, they got the authentication, which show you exactly how you can send the API key. Remember, if you wanted some extra functionality such as the voting functionality, then you're gonna need to send them your key like this in the header. Again, if that doesn't make sense for you, I'm gonna show you how you can do that. But they also have different things such as pagination, the breed, categories, and so many things that you can do, and even have the API references where you can search for different things such as get your favorite, get specific favorite, and so many other things. They even give you a test demo that you can click send, and you can get a request. You can go here on images, and if you get all public images, and this is the cool thing, they give you a really good demo in terms of the data type of every single things, and if you can even test it here to get a dummy request for you to see how your data is going to look like. I know this is out of the scope of this video, but just wanted to take some time and explain you how this works for you to gonna go ahead and explore that. All right, we got the API key, we got the URL, but how do we get those image? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is where HTTP request comes in. This is where we need to make a request. And remember, whenever we click this button, that's when we want to go ahead and get those images. How can we do that? Well, if we already take a look at here, there is a function that is firing, or aka executing, when we click this button. So what I need to do is I need to go inside this function. I'm going to use a built-in JavaScript function called fetch, and the way it works is it works with that then and that catch their JavaScript promise. Now if they don't make sense for you guys, what that means is, all right, we're going to ask for the images, but what happens if we do not get any images from them, or there is an error? Well, this is when the that catch comes into place. But what happens if we do get the image? Well, the that then is going to execute, and then the other that then is going to execute again. But the reason we need two that then is because here we're going to make sure that the request that is coming in is going to come in the right format. So we do something like rest, and then rest.json. That's going to give us the data as a JSON, and then here we're going to go here and we save that data. So here I can name the data that are coming in, they're cats. And over here, I'm just going to go here and display every single cat that we have. So I'm going to go here and do cat, and I'm going to go here and display every single cat that we have. For the catch one, just in case we have an error, for the sake of this video, I'm just going to go here and console log the error. But for your case, you should properly handle your error that you have. Again, if this doesn't make sense for you, all we're doing is, all right, we're saying, all right, Mr. The Cat API, we heard that you have some cat images for us. Well, we want to get them, and the way we get them is by doing using fetch. And then that then is in case we have every single image, and that catch is in case that something happened, there is an error. But one last thing we need to add inside the fetch is to add the URL of where you want to go and get those cats, and this is the URL. And if you guys remember, we said earlier we're not going to use the API key yet because we don't need it for this. However, at the end of this video, we're going to show you exactly how you can use it within your request using fetch. All right, so what should happen? Well, what should happen is this. Whenever we click on this button, this function is going to execute, which is this entire function. And first, it should console log hello world, and second, it should go ahead and ask for those images. And here, once we get those images, which is like this, then it should console log every single image. Let's take a look and see if that happened. So if I go here and click get random cat, and boom, there you go, ladies and gentlemen, I have an array of the data of the cats. And if I copy and paste this into a new tab, and boom, I got a random cat. And if I click it again, I got a new random cat every single time that I click it, which is fantastic, which is great. Now we get in the data, but how can we display them in the page? Before we even talk about displaying them in the page, let's think about how can we maintain this data? How can we have that data inside our application state? Well, before, if you had to do this, if you have to have a state, then you would need to have a class component. Again, this is just one example where you have to do class.app, and then after that you do react.component, and then you go here, then inside of that you have to have a constructor, you have to have super, and then finally you have your state of your application, and then after that you need to have the render function, and then inside the render function, and finally after you have the render element, that's when you need to return what you want to display in the page, and finally you have the code that finally look like HTML. Again, look at that. You need to have a class, constructors, render, and so on, just for you to have the state to store information in order for you to be able to consume them inside your state. Well, the good news is React hooks comes in and replace all of that and said, all right, mister, you have now a very simple way just for you to have a state in your application. And how can we do that? We can do that using React hooks. So what is React hooks? React hooks are functions that allow you to hook into the React state and also into the React lifecycle. Again, that might not make sense for you, but let's do an example here. Here's how we start with React hooks. Number one, we need to bring the hooks that we want to work with, okay? There might be tons of different React hooks that we can use, but for this one to have a state inside our function component, all we have to do is use something called React hooks. And the way you work with it is, here's our functional component, which is function app. So what we need to do here, right after that component, we're going to start working with that hooks, okay? And here's how it works. As you can see here, I use this useState. The first thing I want you to pay attention here is this parenthesis. This is the default value of your hooks. For example, your hooks can start with 0, it can start with a default array, it can start with a string, it can start with any default value that you want. In our case, because we only going to need to use the URL of that image, which is just a string, that's all we need in order for us to display that image. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to leave that default value to be just a string. So whenever you use the useState hook, it returns two value, okay? It returns two value. The first value that it returns is the actual value in the hooks. For example, let's assume that this was testing. The default value of that hooks was testing. Then the first value that this return, it's something called testing. And number two, the second value that this useState return, then it's a function that you can update this value with. Again, that might not make sense, but we're going to show you exactly how this work. Okay, so let's assume that the second value that it return is just a function that allow you to update that value. So how do we access those value now? The way we access them is through this array right here. Okay, so what we do here is inside this value, we're gonna pass them these two value. It can be named anything. Let's assume we're gonna call this one cat URL. Okay, remember this cat URL is going to represent the default value. In this case, it is going to be testing. Now the second value, we can call this one set cat URL, and this second value is a function that will allow us to update this value. Let's assume that we wanted this testing to be changed to Patrick. In order for us to update that value, we need to use the second value here, such as this value here, and pass it the new updated value that we want our hooks to have. For example, now if this one's going to be Patrick, which means this data now is going to be Patrick because we use the second value here to update our data in our hooks. Okay, I know this is a lot, but we almost there, guys. Okay, bear with me. All right, so what we need to do in this case is this. So I'm gonna leave this one as an empty string, and what I'm gonna do is wherever we are fetching the data, and this is where we are getting the data. Now let's take a look and see how the data return. If we take a look, the data is an array, which is this is an array. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to get the cat data, which is this is gonna be the cat, and I'm going to get the first element inside this array. Okay, there could be multiple cats, but for this tutorial I'm only gonna focus on the first cat that I have. Second, when I have this object, which is I'm talking about this first cat, which is that's the cat number one, there is the value that I need, which is the URL. So to get the URL, it's a matter of getting the first element and do that URL. So literally that should go ahead and give us the actual image of the cat. I'm going to rename this one to be cat URL, something like that. And then once you have this value, then you need to update this value inside your React hooks. If you remember, in order for us to do that, we cannot do that with the first one because it is the actual value, but we can do that with the second one. So we're gonna copy this function here and come here and update this value with the new URL that we get from the page. So that should go ahead and update whatever value was inside this string with the new value of the cat that we have. So let's take a look. Let's see what happens. So if I go back into the page, I'm still seeing the old image, which is fine. That is fine. But if I click on this button, check this out. Nothing happened. I'm not even seeing the updated value in the state. But how can we see the value that is inside the hooks? Well, remember the first value here is the actual value that inside the hooks. So let's go here down the line. I'm gonna go here and console log that cat URL. So all I'm doing is I'm taking this first value, which is whatever is inside that useState, then we are console log it right here just for us to see what we're working with. So if we go back, so as you can see now, the value is empty. But check this out. If I set a default value such as testing inside of it, now the value is equal to testing. So again, just a quick reminder, whatever is here is the default value of this. But remember, when we click on this button, which is this one, this function gonna fire, and then here we update the new value with whatever we got from the cat API. So let's take a look. So when I click this function, then the cat value should update. Let's see what happened. And boom, now with the cat URL actually updated with an actual URL of a cat, which is fantastic, which is great. But why are we not seeing this into the page? The reason being is because if we go back inside the image, which is right here, instead we are using a hard-coded value inside the image. So what we want to do is we actually want to use this value right here that we are getting from the useState. So I'm going to do cat URL. I'm going to paste it right there. And now whenever this value update, we should go ahead and get an actual value that we can work with. And if I go back here, first thing, I don't see anything. Don't worry, we're going to fix that. But if I click this random cat, I'm seeing a cat, which is fantastic, except the picture is so big. But if I click this button again, I'm getting a new cat, which is super big. The cat is just too big. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and add some CSS. So I'm gonna go back here and import the CSS that we have, which is app.CSS. And what I'm talking about is I'm talking about this specific file. And after we import this file, so I'm going to go here and add a class called app inside of this. I'm going to give this one a name called app. So once I've done that, I need to go inside the app.css. I'm going to delete everything, and I'm going to first select that app. I'm going to display flex, and then I'm going to go here and justify content center, align item center, flex direction column. We want it to go column, and then padding 20 padding. And then after that, I'm going to select every single image. I'm going to give them a max width. So what that means is I don't want them to go past that width because the image is just too big. I don't want them to go past 400 width. And I'm also going to give them max height, and I don't want them to pass 400 height either. So that should at least control on how big the image went. Lastly but not least, I also want to wrap that up with some further CSS. So I select the button, give it a padding, outline none, and border radius, and then select the image and button and give the margin type for both of them. That's all I do. And then if I go back here and click to get a new cat, and there we go. Now the image doesn't go beyond the max height and width that I gave it. So if I click this, I can get a new cat, and I can get a new cat, which is fantastic. This is great, but we have one issue here, right? Check this out. When I refresh this page, there is no cat. We want to have a cat when the page refresh. So when the page refresh, we want to have a cat. How can we do that? Well, in order for us to do this, we got two ways. Check this out. One thing I can do in my case, I can go back to the default image that I had for the cat, if you remember. So I had an image for the cat, which is I pasted right there. So what that means is when the page loads, the page always going to load with this image of the cat. Check this out. So now the page loads, it loads with this cat image. If I load this page again, it loads with this image over and over and over. Now again, that will be definitely up to you guys in terms of how you want your application to work. But for this application, what I want to happen is every single time that the page loads, I want a new random cat as well. So how can we do that inside a functional component? Well, in order for us to do that in a functional component, we need to use another hooks. Now hooks are just function that lets you hooks inside the React state or the React lifecycle. So this hooks allows to hook inside the React state, but there's also another hooks called useEffect that allows to hook into the React lifecycle, which means when the page loads, we will be able to get a new cat when the page loads. Now this particular hook itself takes care of component did mount, component did update, and component will mount. So which means it automatically listens for all these three events and render accordingly. Now how do we use it? The way we use it is first we need to use the useEffect, which is this function in particular, aka this hooks, and then we need to pass a function inside of it. There we go. We have our function, and then all we have to do is we need to call our get cat. If you remember, this function is the one that go ahead and get the cat, update the state, it update this value inside our hooks, and so on and so on. So all we have to do is call this cat inside this useEffect event. But before we do that, I want to show you something that's really important. Okay, before I do that, let's console log hello world just to make sure that when the page loads, we can at least see hello world in the page. So let's take a look. So if I go here, and there you go, ladies and gentlemen, I am able to see hello world, which means when the page loads, I'm able to see that component did mount, render that inside my useEffects. So let's call this function inside of it and see what happened. So there you go. I take this function and call this function inside my useEffects. So let's see what happens. So if I go back inside the page, take a look. Oh my goodness, random image are being over, and there's so many calls being done over. Oh my gosh, it's taking random image over and over. And the whole reason, I'm gonna go here and comment that and stop that from happening and explain you guys why this is happening. Well, here's why this is happening. Remember, whenever you use useEffect, these three events are being fired. So what happened is when we call this function inside the useEffect, which is this function happen, but one thing that's happening here is this: we are updating the state of that component, which means whenever the state change, the component did update, which this event fire, and it's going to re-render this component over and over and over again. So that means every single time that the component did update, this function is being run over and over and over. How can we stop this from happening? Well, in order for us to stop this from happening is this takes another param. I'm going to pass it an array. So in this case, we're saying, all right, so I want you to only fire once, okay? But I only want you to fire again if this value change, which means every single time that this value change, that's when you want it to fire again. Okay, so that should fix our issue. I'm gonna go here and uncomment this function and see if that works. So if I go back to the page, the first time I got a random image. So if I refresh it again, I got another random image. And if I refresh it again, I got a random image, and so on and so on. All right, guys, before we go any further, let's review everything we've done, okay? So we've gone to the Kit API, we sign up for an account, we get our API key, we went into the documentation, we go ahead and get the quick start guide. Once we get that, we set up our React application, we delete everything, we set our very basic JSX, then we start fetching for some data by using this endpoint, and then we use two hooks, which is useState and useEffect. We update the state of that value right here. Then we also listen for when the page loads using useEffect, and so on. Now, before we wrap up this section, if you remember, guys, this entire API has so many other functionality that you can leverage, such as the upvote and downvote. But in order to use them, you're gonna have to go to the documentation. For example, there is the vote here and so on. You can create a vote and etc. But one thing they're gonna need you to pass is that key right here inside the header. How do we do that using the fetch API? Well, the way we do that is we pass an extra param right here. You see, we pass an object, then we define the headers, and then here, that's when we pass it the X API key, which is X API key. That's the value that they want us to pass. If we take a look, this is the actual value. Then once we have that, we're gonna go here and pass it the actual value of the API, which is this guy. And boom, that should be passing the API key. Again, we're not using that exact method, which this feature won't work. And now it should be passing the API key inside the header. So if we go back to our application should still be working. If we get a new random cat, we're getting a new random cat, and so on. And ladies and gentlemen, this is our entire application. Now, if this is your first time on this channel, we do have a lot of videos on this channel. Definitely check them out. You'll see things like send email with Node.js, get started with Express Handlebar, and even deploy your React application to GitHub pages. So definitely check them out.